And that's the first track of our guest presenter this Sunday morning. What a great track. I have to say, one of my favorites of all time, Hugh Masekela and Tanai. Who is our guest today? Well, he's got a corporate path that has taken him from Denise Rates Attorneys to Gallo Music Africa to Sony Music Entertainment. He founded Hater Records. He was an executive head at Vodacom South Africa. And then he moved on to a very interesting space. He moved on to an organization called the Dramatic, Artistic and Literary Rights Organization, DALRO, which talks, of course, to so much. It talks to our intellectual property, our property that we as artists have, what happens to it, and who has a right to it. IP is a question that is under huge debate in South Africa at the moment and globally as well, not just in the entertainment sector, but more broadly as well. So it's a real delight to have Lazarus Serobe, the managing director of DALRO, on the line. Lazarus, je parle avec toi en Paris.
You got me there, Michelle. I can only say very little. My French is very well.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
So, Laz, you are in Paris right now. And why? We're talking to you in Paris. What are you doing there?
Michelle, I'm actually in Paris en route to Brussels, where a meeting of organizations like DALRO are meeting in a conference from tomorrow. It's called the IFRO, International Federation of Reprographic Rights Organizations. And DALRO is a member thereof. It deals internationally with what DALRO deals with in South Africa, which is the protection of copyrights.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get on to that in 1 second, but we actually do always ask our guest presenter on the show their first choice of song. Hugh Masekela's Tonight, great choice. You had everybody in the studio dancing, so obviously
thank you. That was the plan.
It worked. Laz, talk to us about the protection of rights and the issues and challenges that we have here in South Africa when it comes to copyright for dramatic, artistic and literary works. But also, as you say, you're on your way to Brussels with organizations that are doing similar work with you. How this impacts globally, how we think about it globally as well.
Michelle, we are at a very challenging time in the life of copyrights and IP in general, intellectual property.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, these challenges are brought on by technology, by the digital world, where things are so easy to move around, to copy, to send to friends, to send to colleagues, without a thought of the creator of that work.
Yeah.
How they are compensated for all of that. While we enjoy their works, are they in a position to sustain themselves and create even more work for us to enjoy? So we really are in a challenging phase of technology, and as I say, of digitization. But the creators, the authors, the artists are the ones that are suffering at the moment because they find themselves and their works being pirated, copied, you name it.
So let's look at the old-fashioned route, how we looked at how an artist created work. And it's not just music. I mean, you know, the fact that DALRO does look at literature, it looks at artistic works, it looks at music, it looks at theatre. And it would be interesting for you to maybe just explain the journey very briefly. What would have happened in the 1950s? What would have happened in the 1980s? What would have happened in 2000? And now, as you say, we're on the edge of either a precipice or just a complete shift in how we think about creativity.
Yeah, just one point. DALRO actually does not look at music. We do.
Oh, SAMRO. Sorry, SAMRO. We know is music. My apologies.
SAMRO does the music side. So we do, however, look after musicals which grand rights in musicals, which the combination of music and performance together, and we do look after that. But to go to your question, so the easiest part would have been the grand old days when an author wrote a book, it was in a bookshop, and everybody that needed to read went and bought it. That was the easy part. Or a dramatist wrote a play, produced it, and it was staged in a theater, and people went, paid for a ticket, sat down and watched the play, and so on and so on. And artists would paint or make a sculpture, and if you want it, you pay for it, or you went to a museum to look at it, leave it there, or you went to a gallery to see it, etc. Then somewhere in between, and I won't stick to your dates, because in between came the Xerox machine.
Yeah.
And you now saw a book, you thought, I like the book, but not enough to buy it. I just want to use a chapter of it. Then you made a copy of that book. And that's where then the organizations like DALRO came in to actually license that activity, to say, yes, you may not want to buy the whole book, but if you're going to use the book and make copies of extracts of the book to under certain conditions, you still need to remunerate the artist.
Yeah.
And you pay a fraction of what you would have paid for the whole book. And reprographic rights organizations, RROs as we call them, the DALRO-like organizations would then collect that money and distribute it to the author. And obviously, in the case of a book, the publisher.
Yeah.
And then came the digital world, and now, so I'm really fast tracking. Sorry about it. Then came the digital world, and then it's a link, it's a download, and however many, it's a PDF, it's a JPEG. All of those things have brought on new problems now. So it is no longer someone standing in the photocopy machine counting pages where we know so many pages were copied, etc. Now it's very easy to create a PDF of a whole book, send it to friends. If you like the book, and you send them to your friends, can send them to hundreds and thousands of friends if you so like. And guess what? The author then loses all of that in that mix. So while digitization and technology has been a boon for society at large, it's becoming a challenging solution, and we need to find the solutions for to sustain our creative space, our creativity, our culture on all of that. We need to create to be, I always say that a nation that does not look after its creative people, after its artists, has no culture.
Yeah, I'm with you. Lazarus, you talking about something which is hugely challenging, because there are so many different modes of how we can take on culture and not pay for it. I'm thinking about myself. I mean, I'm on Twitter, and every week as part of my show, I might use an artwork. Now, what happens in that case? Because when the artwork is used on Twitter, I mean, I think today I tweeted a Vincent van Gogh picture as part of the promotion for Twitter, for the show.
Okay.
Then the question becomes, A, what happens to those kinds of issues? And I suppose, B, I know in the art world, what happens when people use images of artworks maybe on the covers of books or in the secondary economy, like the auction world? How does that work?
So exactly, that is where we come in. That is exactly what we're talking about, what DALRO does. Yeah. So as you correctly point out, we look after those rights in the secondary market. So in the primary market, the artist will have put up the painting, sold it to you, Michelle, it's hanging on your wall, and you own that painting, the physical painting. The copyright in that painting remains with the artist.
Yep.
It remains with Van Gogh in this instance. And if you are going to use it to put onto a cover of a book or into a magazine, into an advert, etc., you need permission to do that.
So it's where I would make money out of it.
Yeah, where you're going to use it commercially.
Yeah.
Right. So there are exceptions where, for personal use, the public is allowed to use copyrighted works for personal use, for criticism, for critique, for teaching, etc., without having to get the license. But those are very limited, and they should not compete with the interests of the author or the artist, i.e. do not create a situation where the artist would have earned money but does not because of your activity. But you can do research, you can do learning, you can, for that purpose, for personal use, you are allowed to do that. So it's not that restrictive, but the minute you do it commercially, especially, and you put it in an advert to generate income, you put it on the cover of a book, or you put it on the cover of on T-shirts to sell. When we've seen all of these things, right? So that requires permission. So talking about auction houses, for instance, they do take out license. We do license them for that purpose, for putting the works in the catalogs. As you know, catalogs are a very big part of auction at auction houses. But all the works that go into the catalogs are permitted. Correct. I mean, not in all instances, but generally speaking, yes, they do. We have relationships as DALRO with auction houses, where when the catalogs come out, they furnish us with copies of the catalog. We invoice them and we collect from the auction houses and distribute to the artists or their heirs apparent.
Yeah. You mentioned, we were talking about Vincent van Gogh earlier, and one of our listeners is saying, what about items that are more than 50 years old? I understand that they would then be out of copyright. Is there kind of an age limit to copyright?
Yes, copyright is limited, certainly. It is not the items that are 50 years old that are out of copyright. They have to be, it's copyright subsists in any work for 50 years after the death of the artist. So you only start counting the 50 years in general terms after the artist has died. It's from the end of the year that the artist died, then you count 50.
Then
50
it's another
years.
50 after that. Okay, that makes
so
that.
They're still in copyright for another 50 years.
Yeah. Lazarus, I mean, this is such an interesting kind of question around when we describe copyright. What could we actually be saying? So I'm thinking, for example, of, I know that one of your guests a little bit later will be the artist, fabulous artist, Blessing Ngubeni. Now, if I go and I buy one of Blessing's works, which he's doing very well with, I have to add. I don't think I could afford one of his works anymore. But anyway, if I go and buy one of Blessing's works and I hang it on the wall, now it's an oil painting. So now I own the painting, but he owns the copyright. It doesn't mean, though, that he can do that exact painting again, or does it?
He can, not exactly. The good thing about artwork is the chances of him doing exactly the same thing are quite slim, but generally he can, and sometimes artists will produce things in editions of. So there'll be an edition of 5, an edition of 10, etc., or in a series, which means they are quite similar, if not the same, but editions are multiples of the one painting, which is then created in numbers. So he can do that, and often though it's kind of now step in the realm of ethics, that is done primarily prior to the sale. So by the time you buy it, you ought to know that it is one of 5 or one of 10, and yours is number 3 or number 10. So that gives it credibility to say that it is a limited edition. We have seen works that are editions that are unlimited, i.e. they go on and on and on. But when you purchase that, you would know that it's an unlimited edition. So the chances of walking into a grandmother's house and it's hanging there as well, is very high. Yeah. And therefore its value will come down.
I mean, that's exactly it. Is that, I mean, you say it does then position the artist in the space of ethics, but also what it does then is it minimizes the artist's value for sure. So that's like something really valuable, I suppose, to know.
But what makes works like Blessing's work so valuable, as you can imagine, is that I doubt that even he would be able to replicate it.
Absolutely.
As an original.
I very much doubt that he would be able to replicate it. Lazarus, you've chosen as your second song Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, and I'm interested that you chose the original. It's a song that has been, I mean, you talk about copyright. It's a song that has been covered by so many different artists. I think it was Jeff Buckley who really cracked in and made that first cover, but I could be wrong. Why did you go for the very first, the original?
Because I'm a Leonard Cohen fan. Simply put. And I think you'll realize that from the choice of songs this morning, there's something common about the two stalwarts and the two artists. They are what you could call they don't have perfect pitch in singing, right?
Yes.
They kind of, and as my friend and author Bongani Madondo wrote when Leonard Cohen passed away, that he actually sings with the voice of the devil himself.
At least
I'm paraphrasing Madondo. Yeah. I'm sure he put it much better than that. But it was a stunning tribute he paid for Leonard Cohen, and it said something like that. And that's a kind of voice that appeals to me, that is imperfect.
Let's listen to the beauty of imperfection. I almost feel like we need to give that maybe a few beats of silence after that. You talk about copyright, and then there's also the true original, and without doubt that version of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen is the true original, is it not, Lazarus?
Indeed, it is, Michelle. It's an original in many ways. Is that voice can be replicated. That song has been done many times, precisely because it is so good, and sometimes copying is the ultimate praise, as they say. That's just the genius of Leonard Cohen.
You know, what's interesting is, as I said earlier, I've heard so many different covers of that song, and I think it's become, I don't want to say trite, but it's become quite trite. I mean, I recently heard a young teenager, 16-year-old girl singing it, and I couldn't really, I felt nothing for it. And I think it's when I go back to listening to Leonard Cohen singing it, as you say, I mean, to misquote Bongani Madondo, perhaps not the voice of the devil, but it's the voice of many years of experience, of pain, of authenticity, if one wants to call it that. I mean, that's a gift, eh?
It is a gift, and it is the one gift that we have as a people. That we have scribes, we have authors, we have artists like Leonard Cohen, like Hugh Masekela, like Lesego Tlhapi, like Blessing Ngobeni, as you say, that are original, and that we somehow need to look after them. We've got to look after what they do.
You've nailed it. You've just nailed the way into our first guest. I made a note here, and I put a big circle around saying, moving into true originals. And our first guest is your first guest, Lesego Tlhapi. Of course, she is a true original. What was one of the reasons you wanted her to come on board as your guest?
As I've already said, because I find her so brave in this world of political correctness that we've come to live in, that she can really pull the horse by the tail. And she's brave enough, and you know, my brief was to bring someone, family, community, colleague, etc. And my disclaimer is Lesego is family to me, and I've seen her grow, into this lovely, creative, as I say, brave and original person.
Lesego Hlabi, we've got you on the line. Always great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Hi, Uncle Lazi. I don't know if I'm supposed to call you Uncle Lazi on radio.
Not on radio.
So like, hi, Lazarus.
So let's go with the Uncle Lazi and this idea of family and community. As Lazarus correctly said, we always ask our guests to choose people that may not be directly in their own world, but by the very nature of the world that they're in, they make our lives better, more interesting, more thought-provoking, and we do start to see what that joining of the dots could be. If I may, Lesego, I'd love to know how you see the dots being joined with Uncle Lazarus, but also with what it means to be an original in a world where, as he says, someone who is able to brave and go against what is political correctness. Lesego? Oh, Lazarus, I think we've lost her. We're going to try and get her back on the line. She is on Zoom, but it appears that she is still trying to get on the line, or I'll just have to find out what is going on. Lazarus, while we wait to find out what is going on and go further with the conversation, I want to take you very briefly back to the protection of rights in a time of, when we say technology, and also the ideas of common Creative Commons as well. Maybe you could explain Creative Commons to our listeners, and also just explain to us a little further the idea of where we need to go with technology. I mean, we can't sit the next 10 years trying to figure out how to do this.
Michelle Constant on SAfm.
Our guest today is Lazarus Serobe, the Managing Director of South Africa's Dramatic, Artistic and Literary Rights organisation, DALRO. His first guest is Lesego Hlabi. We do fortunately have her back on the line. But Laz, if I may just briefly get that comment from you with regards to the protection of rights. We know there's Creative Commons, we know there's technology, and as I said, we can't go through another decade of not being able to figure out how we protect the rights of our creatives. What are some of the answers you're hoping to come up with as you go to Brussels in the next couple of days? Okay. We still don't seem to have either. That's a very...
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Hello, Lazarus.
Okay. Hi, sorry, I got kicked off, and then I think when I came back, it was muted.
All good.
Yeah. So the international IP community is obviously from WIPO, the United Nations, to organizations like ours on the ground, are trying to find these solutions and working hard and at speed. But as you know, technology outpaces everyone.
Yep.
And by the time solutions are found, we're almost found begging. But we continue to do that. But for us, the most important thing is education. Is people becoming aware, people getting that sense that nothing is free. So that piece of work that you think you got for free, when you PDF Lesego's book and send it to friends and they getting it for free, somebody has paid for that. Somebody has paid sometimes blood and sweat from a creator's perspective. It's taken many hours and days and months of writing for your enjoyment. And just like, copyright is, intellectual property is property. So just like your own house, where you didn't want anyone to come and live there in the guise of letting it and not paying rent.
Yeah.
The author of the work also needs to be compensated for your use of the work if it's beyond what you've paid for by buying the book at a bookshop.
If I listen to you, Lazarus, I get the sense that actually what the work that has to be done is around advocacy and lobbying, as opposed to just finding a tech answer or a technology answer that's going to say every time you PDF that book or whatever, that this is an ethical question. It's a moral and ethical question.
Yes, it is indeed. It's a lobbying, it's a teaching, it's a educating, it's holding one another's hands and saying, as I said, if we don't look after our creatives, then we will be left with no culture at all. We will be known as, or rather will become unknown, actually. No one will ever know who we are because we lack that culture. We lack history. We lack somebody that is commenting about who we are at any particular time and feeling that they are worthy.
Yeah. Okay, we do have Lesego Tlabi. Her alter ego is, of course, as many people know, Coconut Cults, but we have Lesego with us today. And she is much, much more than her alter ego on the line. Lesego, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Lesego, just picking up on what Lazarus has said now, this idea that you could write a book and next thing, everybody PDFs it. It might make you more famous, but it's not going to make you any wealthier you were than when you started writing it. What is the kind of...
Yeah.
Go for it.
Sorry?
No, I could see you were going to jump in there. Go for it.
Well, only because I do understand, obviously intellectual property is important and, preserving things and making money. But I do think sometimes like work like mine, for instance, I do wish to share. Yeah. And I think it's important for it to have as many eyes as possible because I do deal with topics of race, of politics, of sort of privilege. So I'm not really that against sharing it with, the right intentions, especially because I do know that some of the work that I've written has been studied at schools and stuff like that. And not a lot of people can afford to also get their hands on it the right way. Yeah. So for those, there are some reasons why I do think, it's okay to share because it's more important for the message to get out there. It's more important for as many people to read it. But yeah, I think obviously there are people who do it for more dubious reasons. And it is important for writers, especially because writing is not a very lucrative, way to make money. So it is important to protect the rights of writers just because it's already such a difficult industry to break through. It's a difficult industry to make a lot of money from. So in that way, preserving, intellectual property is important.
How does it work with a comedian? You come up with a skit or a joke or a comment or whatever the case may be. Do you then own that, or is that part of Creative Commons where it just belongs to the public domain?
I do own there are phrases that have come to become popular through me, not that I've made them up, but that they've become popular and familiar with my brand. Yeah. And I did have a company, a brand that tried to use those phrases with a similar character, but without using me or paying me. And very swiftly, we got on the case and the ad was removed because it was very clear that they were trying to have a likeness to Coconut Curls, using the same lingo, using the same kind of jokes, but without then having to pay Coconut Curls or use Coconut Curls in the ad. So yeah, once you have, a certain amount of, I guess, clout, or you have a certain amount of following, then there are certain things that if they become famous because of you, or they become particular to your brand, that you can have ownership over, even if not necessarily with a copyright law, but because people know, sort of, if Coconut Curls says, think about it, or she says, Gebenga, that immediately comes up as something that's familiar to me. So it is very clear that, that brand was trying to take advantage of using the Coconut Curls likeness without having to use Coconut Curls. And so there we got to, have them remove the ad.
I mean, Lazarus Lesero's raising such an interesting thing. So there's the spoken word or the written word, which would be Coconut Cult says A, B, C, D. But there is Coconut Cult, which is also a copyright. Is it a copyright in its own right? It's a brand, it's a character. How does that work?
It's more a brand and character thing, as you say, and would probably fall more into the performance sector. So with copyright, remember that you cannot copyright an idea. There's no copyright in an idea. It is that translation of that idea into material form that makes it copyrightable and protectable. So when Lesego has an idea in her head, it's not protected, but the minute she performs it and it's recorded, it's captured somehow, or she writes a script down in any way, then that is a matter of copyright. And Lesego said something very important, though, that I think we should not confuse with protection, is that the creator, Lesego as an author, has every right, that is actually her exclusive right, to grant permission to people to utilize her works. And that's exactly what we're emphasizing. It is her right. It is not the third party's
right as the audience.
As an audience to then appropriate it.
Yeah.
So she's just giving two clear indications. So in one instance, she wants people to use it, schools to use her work. Fantastic. But the minute somebody else uses it inappropriately, she's able to say, hey, stop it. Because it is her right to grant that permission to anyone, whether it is granting the permission to the school kids where she wants to, and not grant permission to a corporate entity that wants to appropriate their work unbecomingly.
So we do have to go to a break, but Lesego, when we come back, maybe what you could also just identify further for our listeners, taking what Lazarus has said, I mean, it's a really interesting thought, is that it's such a kind of it's such a fine line that you walk. I mean, on the one side of that line there is the commercial, but then on the other side of that line there is your purpose, which may be different. You might be able to use the commercial to drive your purpose, but you may be able to just put your purpose, as you say, into the schools, into spaces where you think it's critical. So when we come back, I'd love to know how you do manage to walk that line. I mean, I imagine that there is some kind of model, if not a business model, then certainly a purpose model, if we could talk about that in a moment.
Testing 1 2 1 2. The second season of The Unplug is here. Music on log. Catch The Unplug every Saturday at 6 p.m. exclusively on SABC 1. Mzansi for sure.
Hi friends, it's me, Farida. The all new episodes of Takalani Sesame are ready for you.
Yeah! Join Farida Matuleng on Takalani Sesame. Weekdays at 3:30 on SABC 2.
At SAfm Radio and at Mesh Constant on SAfm.
Our guest presenter is Lazarus Serobe. We've heard his music. We've got his first guest on the line, who is Lesego Tlabi. She is also known in the world as Coconut Cult, as her alter ego. But we're talking about how you walk the line between commercial and between purpose. And I mean, sometimes the one pushes more forward, I imagine, than the other. Lesego, how do you manage that? Do you have a manager to manage it, or do you manage it in terms of what you believe in?
I don't even think I manage it. Like, a lot of what happened in my career happened to me rather than me planning it this way. Because when I started Coconut Cult, it was more just me addressing some of the people that I might have gone to school with, and trying to speak about issues that were important to me in a way that I thought they would listen to. So I didn't actually think that there was a career out of doing what I was doing until people started approaching me to then make a career out of it. So even when I make videos now, it's very much purpose driven. There are some times where obviously I'll do a collaboration with a brand and make a video that way. But I'm also very insistent that the essence of CALS is in every single project I do. If we're not going to be able to address race, if we're not going to be able to address politics, then there's no point in me just selling your product, because I'm not just a comedian for comedy's sake. I'm a comedian for satire's sake. So for me, everything I do is led with the purpose. I literally only do CALs when I feel very sort of incensed by something that's happened in the news, when I feel very passionate about something that's going on in South Africa. That's when I make a video. So it's not just because I'm trying to make people laugh or because I want people to, have people on my page. It's literally because there's something that's happened in politics or in the news that I feel very strongly about, and that I feel the reaction from maybe white people has not been so great. And so that's what I performed. It's just very lucky for me that I suppose it has become something that I can make money from. But like I said, I will never ever collaborate with a brand that I don't believe in. I'll never ever do work that doesn't allow me to still perform the satire and still go far and push it there. So that's why I think for me, it's still purpose driven, even when I do things that are more for the commercial sake.
We're going to close off with you, Lesego. I'm worried that we're not going to get to Laz's next guest, but if I may ask you this, when we think of the difference between comedy and satire, I often feel like anybody who is involved in satire has to have a certain amount of bravery that you might not need if you're a comedian, because it does talk to what Lazarus was saying earlier about the ability to just go forward and be brave and not simply aligned to political correctness or to what certain people or races believe in. What does bravery mean for you?
It's actually really cool and weird that I get called brave, because I think for me, it's something that it's very natural to me to speak up about certain issues. And I've been doing it since I was in school. Sometimes I get in trouble for it, but it's very much just a part of my personality. So I don't know that I'm performing bravery or that I'm being brave, rather than just being myself, and that the person that I happen to have become is just someone that is maybe more outspoken than other people. But for me, this is just how I am. I don't feel nervous about it. I don't feel scared. I don't feel like it's a thing of courage. It's very natural to me.
Lazarus, you mentioned earlier that you thought Lesego was brave in how she approached the world. How do you see bravery?
I think it is exactly as Lesego says it. I mean, like most things, if you set out to do something, if it's in your, then you are. It's not you. You are playing it up. Bravery is that innate feeling. It's that innate response to things, the way you relate to the world.
Yeah.
And you either have it or you don't.
Yeah, courage, maybe.
Courage.
Yeah. Lesego, I want to say thanks so much for joining us. A tweet from one of our listeners, Janet, saying Coconut Cults is superb, best host of the Simon Sabella Awards just over a year ago. So funny and smart. So there we go. Lazarus, your second guest, the artist Blessing Ngubeni, doing extraordinary work, incredibly insane artworks, actually. Why have you chosen him?
Again, I'm a fan of young people doing great things. I follow and just being in the realm of young creatives doing great things makes me wake up in the morning. And Blessing is one of those that forces me to get out of bed to go make sure the world treats him and his likes right.
Wow, that's an amazing thing to say. Wow. Blessing, you're on the line. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it enormously.
Good morning.
Good morning. Blessing, you hear Lazarus say that it's people like you and the work that you create that makes him get up and shift and change the world around copyright. What does it mean for you to have someone like a DALRO in your corner in terms of the work that you do?
I think for me, as a creative individual, I've been struggling with so many things in terms of the rights, the law, of art in general, and then for me, when I got introduced to Lazi and the DALRO team, it was a great opportunity for me to also raise my things that were like things that happened in the past, For instance, there were moments where a board of my work was taken for consignment. I never got anything, and then it disappeared on the air. But because I did not have the right people to talk to, give me advice on how to claim those things, I lose that board of work. But having them, coming to help me, it created like a sense of, where I own back my rights of my creativity ideas, to not being taken like for nothing, They help me in so many ways, in such a way that if he says he is my fan, I'm like, I'm his fan too, because the job that he's doing for me is like a great job. I mean, I'm just imagining how many artists out there that their work has been taken for nothing, I mean, I'm talking about book covers, anything that is featured in a book, or to anyone that might use you or your work for their advertisement and all these other things that is happening. And then at the end of the day, you don't get anything, to just respect the beginning of that work,
Yeah.
So, I think for me, it's a great thing to have people like him around me so that they can guide me. Whenever if somebody requests for a usage of anything of me, before I do anything, I consult and then I connect that person with DALRO so that they can put it in the right position for usage.
Yeah.
And then of course they will come back to me and say, this is the steps that you should follow in 1, 2, and 3. Of course, there's these other ones that are off, like they're for educational purposes. People that they want to be done for outreach program and these other things, which I just consult and then like, no, if you think it's fine, let them use for that day. Which is a good thing because you have a person to guide you before you take a decision, which is the DALRO and the team.
I'm going to stop you right there, Blessing. I'm afraid we have run out of time. Guess what, Lazarus? We literally only have 1 minute. 1 minute. And I know that The House of Truth by Siphiwe Mahala, amazing, is one of your favorite theatrical productions. But also Evita?
Yeah. I'm kind of, I suppose, crazy like that. One of the things I like, sometimes I'm even embarrassed to say in public. So,
do you know all the lyrics to Evita?
When I was younger and my memory worked better, I did, but not anymore. There's too much. The hard drive is full.
The hard drive is full. It's a pity because you're probably lucky, because I was going to say, why don't you sing us out with Evita? But
you don't want that.
Lazarus Serobe, Managing Director of DALRO, South Africa's dramatic, artistic and literary rights organization, doing incredible work to ensure that our artists are recognized, paid and acknowledged in every possible way. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for the news. It's no longer good morning. It's now goodbye.